Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Summertime is typically a time for relaxing, trips to the beach, days by the pool, or time spent on vacation with family. But here at Fresh Catholic, we like to offer lots of things to do, see, hear, and experience. No downtime for Fresh Catholic. We have our weekly topic podcast and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings, available on most podcast platforms and also our YouTube channel. And if you don't have access to any of those, you can listen at our website, freshcatholic.com. Also at our website, freshcatholic.com, you can see our own Fresh Catholic comics, our blog, our faith-based online store with exclusive Fresh Catholic merchandise. Hats, shirts, cups, things for your home, things for your pets. Wonderful. Go check it out. We also have our own brand of Fresh Catholic coffee, roasted and shipped the same day. Who needs that place with the star in their name? Not us. Please consider helping us financially to continue our ministry of bringing people to Christ or back to the church. Anything would help, and much appreciated. We also have Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt. In the first series, Pivotal Prayers, Charles explores and teaches about two foundational Catholic prayers, the Hail Mary and the Our Father. He explains and teaches why we pray these prayers and what they mean. The next series on sin is up and running on the website and on our YouTube channel as well. And there's also an incredible free downloadable book that expands on his lessons. If you would like to purchase a hardcover version of this book, head to our website to order. It has lots of very cool artwork to complement Charles' lessons. Charles also has a new Bible studies series. He is walking us through the Gospel of Mark. There are 6 episodes so far. This will be an ongoing series, so keep an eye out for that. And now, welcome, Simon Balderas. Hello, Simon.
Hey, Lori.
How are you today?
I'm doing okay.
You're very perky today.
Just getting stuff done here.
I know. I'm stealing you away from Fresh Catholic business, but I appreciate you taking time out for this.
Of course.
So the topic of this week didn't necessarily come from the Holy Spirit, although I'm sure it did in some way, but I received emails from listeners, and some are just, you're doing a great job, keep it up. Others, have questions, and I've gotten a couple of letters where they are expressing their kind of disdain for the church or their anger with God.
Okay.
And while, once again, for my new listeners, I'm not a theologian. I don't claim to be one. I may not always have the right answers. I may not always have the right thing to say. But one of the letters specifically said he didn't want an answer from a theologian or a priest. He wanted to hear an answer from a normal person, a normal lay person was his term.
Yeah.
So I just got to thinking about this topic of, people who, the topic of the week I'm saying is how can people who are mad at God and the church work through their feelings to be able to have peace in their lives and hearts?
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand there's a lot of hurt people out there, whether they're hurt from the church or whether they're hurt from someone in the church or just hurt in general by people. I think that's very normal that people do things to hurt other people. But the thing is, do we stay in that? Do we live in that, or do we try to find ways out of it so that we can have some peace in our lives. Because when you're at odds with people, you're not at peace, certainly. When you're having fights and arguments or something bad has happened, you're definitely not at peace. And it doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've felt where you're not in peace. I know I've felt where I'm not in peace. And it does not feel good at all. So I know that that's not God's plan, is for us to be in turmoil and to be anxious and worried and upset and angry. But that's how humans are. So first of all, I just kind of want to talk about a few things about this, about people being angry and why.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm really interested in hearing your take on, why people do turn away from the church. Why do people turn away from God? Because you had a moment in your life, long moment, where you did that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm interested to hear your take on it. And I know you and I also know other people, are, friends or family members who have turned away from the church. And, it's sad to us, I know. So anyway, that's kind of what I want to talk about today. But I want to try to end this episode on a positive note to help people with some ideas of how to get past this anger, how to get through this so that they can have some peace in their hearts and their lives. So I feel like from what I'm hearing, specifically from these people I'm talking about who've reached out to me. So when I say these people or they, that's kind of who I'm specifically talking about. But I don't think these are particularly unusual feelings that these people have. They're just expressing them to me.
Right.
So people who are angry at God, it's usually for a variety of reasons. And I mean, even you and I, when we were doing our pre-talk, we were kind of distinguishing between being mad at the church and being mad at God. So, and I know that they seem like they're intertwined, but I think I get a sense that there's a definite, I'm mad at God for this, I'm mad at the church for this. So people who are angry at God, it's for a variety of reasons. They struggle with tragedies of innocent people. People are starving, people are sick. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of addictions, abuse, death. They are in a fit of rage against God over these things. They feel he's mean, cruel, terrible, and sadistic.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that God is not good. They don't like the term God is good because they don't think God is good, and they can't get past it.
Mm-hmm.
They
and
don't.
It's not good because he allows these things to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they don't see God as a loving God. They see him as like this mean force, that he's not loving. He's allowing all these bad things to happen, And they wonder why God allows this. And a lot of people turn away from the church or God in general. They just give up on God, and they're moving past it. And the people that have reached out to me, they don't feel good about it. They're not like going, oh my gosh, this is the best decision I ever made. I'm feeling great. One of them made the comment, I don't want to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have these feelings.
Right. And they're reaching out to you because they want to know how and why you kind of stomach these things. Is that what it is?
Right. And I think also because hopefully my whole sense of Fresh Catholic is I love the Lord so much. I want everybody to be excited and love him like I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this exuberance and I have just this wide-eyed love for him. And I think when you are angry and upset, I think part of it is it's hard for them to hear me saying the things I'm saying and being positive about him when they don't feel that way. And the other part is they're needing my help to see if possibly they could feel the same way. And maybe, they could get back to or get to feeling like I do.
Right. Well, I think the fact that they're reaching out to begin with is a sign of hope.
I do too.
That they have a willingness or an interest in understanding maybe how God can allow these things to happen without intervening.
Right. And one of my suggestions to one of the people was, because I got the impression that they hadn't listened to the podcast a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so before I kind of responded to the email, I wanted them to go back and listen to the beginning episodes to see the tragedies I've been through, the traumas I've been through, and yet I still sit here today with this positive attitude and this love of God and not blaming God. And I've quite honestly never blamed God for any of the things that have happened to me. I just have never had that sense prior to becoming Christian, while I was Christian, and now that I'm Catholic. I've just never blamed him.
Yeah. I think it depends on what has happened to you. I know that you had some physical traumas. You got in a car accident and all that kind of stuff. That's not like a religious in nature kind of situation, but you think about God when you're near death, and that was where you're at. But I think that people may have gotten hurt from people within the church, as you had mentioned, and it's confusing. I think, for example, maybe somebody with authority within the church, a priest, a deacon, a bishop, somebody, a nun even, and they were abused in some way. It's confusing for especially a child to understand, how can this person who understands and is so in touch with God do this? And that is really, really dangerous, because that person who's abusing them is responsible for them losing their faith. They're turning away. And that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not just like a clear decision to say, I'm leaving the church, I'm angry with you, God. It's also confusing.
Well, and I would think even if a person at the church, it wouldn't even necessarily have to be abuse. It could be anything.
Yeah,
yes. And I think that's a big, ginormous problem. And I personally believe that children years and years ago, when there was a lot of this going on more than today, it's like we've talked about in other episodes, they're really trying to implement a lot of safety protocol now so that those abuses won't happen anymore. I mean, I just know this from working at the church. We really have a lot of trainings that we do and all these different things to try to squash that, because it was out of control. But I often wonder if a lot of the people that maybe had abuse situations in the past at the church when they were children, it didn't come out until more recently when they're adults and they're wrapping their mind around it. And that's really angering them and pushing them over the edge. Maybe when they were a child, they didn't realize what was going on. We've talked about in past episodes where sometimes when a child's being abused, they don't know how to express it. They don't know who to go to. They're afraid if they go to somebody, they're not going to get help, you know? So sometimes it takes until the child is older and a grown up. And then they realize, oh, I'm really mad that somebody didn't protect me. I'm really mad that this happened.
Yeah, I think that's tough for those people who put this off for a number of years, because when you go back to unravel what happened and try to understand it, there's certain things that calcify and that you can't reconcile. I think it's really, really hard. So sometimes people just, they gain some kind of healing, but I think they also live with, a certain amount of pain too, that just, it's hard for them to let go.
Right. So when you turned away from the Catholic Church, which we've talked about in another episode, it was for quite a long time. I think for years we were kind of saying you were turned away for 20 years, but we figured out it was actually longer that you were turned away. And when you turned away, and we don't really need to go back into why you turned away as much as when you turned away. When you broke away and you kind of went more over to a Christian church, how did you feel when you did that? Like, how did that make you feel to do that? Did you feel relief? Were you afraid? Did you think you'd be going into another situation? Like, what were your thoughts leaving? And what was your plan? Did you have a plan?
Well, my personal journey is definitely, I think, it's unique to me in that when I left, I was hurt and I was also very confused. And the type of person that I am is I really seek to understand things. And I didn't see any immediate answers within the church for me at that time to go back and go, oh, okay, I can understand. Oh, I see what happened here. I couldn't do that. But when I went to a non-denominational church, I could begin to understand things. I could take a Bible and go to a Bible study and really crack it open and really understand in depth. And that's what I did for many, many years. I just sort of clung on to the Word of God more than a religion. I didn't feel like I needed the Catholic Church anymore. As a matter of fact, I used to call it dead, because it was so just without understanding. I did things and I didn't understand why. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not that kind of person. So I think that my position is a little bit.
So you never left the Catholic Church and just gave up on God altogether. You kind of you came up with this idea to try a different denomination.
Well, initially I left the church very distinctly and very abruptly, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And then, when you do something like that, I didn't necessarily reject God, but I rejected the people within the church because that's where I was getting hurt. And I didn't lose my faith in that, believing in God, but I would say I lost my Catholic faith when I made that decision. But it did take some time for me to have absolutely no religion until I would say maybe a year later, I started investigating non-denominational churches. As a matter of fact, I really started learning at first by listening to the radio, because I lived in my car. And I would spend a lot of time listening to Christian radio and Bible studies and that sort of thing. So I got a lot of knowledge just from that alone.
So I think it is, interesting, because I know a lot of the people that I've talked to, they are done with the church and they're done with the church. They're done with God, they're done with the church, and they walk away. So you were still attached to God, but you just wanted to break away from the church.
From the Catholic Church, yeah.
So then you were away for quite a number of years. Did you feel better during that time? Did you feel like you were fulfilled and at peace, and that was the answer for you at that time, was like, oh, I'm so glad I'm away from the Catholic Church. I'm so glad I'm with this other church. I'm feeling like $1,000,000. Or were you still kind of lost?
I wouldn't say that I was lost at all. I would say that I was gaining knowledge, but I was not tending to the wounds that I had received when I was in the Catholic Church. And that was the problem, and that I pushed that to the side for a long time, and it began to fester and bother me until the point where I had to seek professional counseling.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I want to touch on that in a few minutes. So I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because I do feel in order for somebody, let's say you're raised in the Catholic Church, you're a cradle Catholic, like you were. I would think in order for somebody to leave the church, because arguably the Catholic Church, Jewish tradition, and Muslim are the three biggest religions that people are born into, and it's a big deal. Those are big religions. To leave any one of those, to me, is a huge deal. It's not like I'm going to Fred's church and I'm just going to quit because I'm bored with it. It's a way bigger deal than that. And you're making quite a statement when you leave a church like that, one of those religions, one of those things, So...
Well, it's embedded in culture, and I think that people really have, rich cultures in their life, and it's just a part of it.
Right.
So to cut that part out, you're leaving behind a lot.
Yes, that's my point. So when somebody does that, there has to be a real big reason to do that. I do get the sense of a lot of people are just indifferent. So your reason for leaving was a major reason. And that's one thing. But some people just walk away and they go, oh, I'm bored. Oh, I don't like the homily. Oh, I don't like the music. Oh, I don't want to go to mass every week. I don't like all the rules. To me, those are just lazy reasons to leave the church. Okay. So I think we need to distinguish between that, where somebody leaves because of a major reason and some people are just indifferent and bored.
Right. Well, and that's also a problem within the church, in that people aren't growing. They're not learning. They're not being enriched. They're not on their own, studying the Bible or reading Catholic books or Christian books, or they're not watering their soul.
Right. But I don't think that's something to blame on anybody but yourself when you're not doing that.
Right. I do think that the church has responsibility to offer things that enrich people's lives.
Absolutely. I believe the same, but I don't think it's fair to say, well, I don't like the homily and the music and the this and the that, so I'm just not going to go. There's so many rules.
Right.
It's like, to me, it's like, well, you can make it better. You can put some effort into it. You can have a good attitude. You can actually even go to a different Catholic church. I know that there's a particular Catholic church locally here I don't particularly like. But here's the good news. There's other Catholic churches I can go to. I don't have to be set in going to that one if I am not feeling enriched there. I have the right to switch a church, but sometimes people have a valid reason that they feel they have to escape the church, and other people I don't think have a valid reason. It's kind of just like I don't.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. So when people turn away from the church, it's one thing. When they turn away from God altogether, it's another thing, in my opinion. Sometimes they go hand in hand, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
Like sometimes people are mad at how could God allow this to happen in his church?
Right.
So you and I were talking about that previously. And what was your comment about the church?
We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Deborah Thayer McLean, the host of Heartfelt Praise, Embracing the Lord's Love podcast. Join me as we explore the Lord's love through stories of redemption and the power of his word. I share revelations that I've received from Scripture with glimpses of my allegorical novels, Rescued by Love and Redeemed by Love, woven through the episodes. Heartfelt Praise is here to uplift your spirit as we see the Lord's love entwined throughout our lives. Subscribe to Heartfelt Praise today and let your heart be encouraged.
Well, people get mad at God and mad at the church, and when they get mad at the church, they're getting mad at the people who run the church, and they run it poorly, some people.
Because they're humans.
They're humans, yeah. We're fallible beings, and of course there's going to be imperfections, and there's going to be problems within the church because it's run by men. That's not what God wants for the church, and hopefully things get cleaned up, but sometimes bad things happen within any church.
Right.
In any denomination, in any religion, whether it's Judaism or Buddhism or Catholicism or Christianity or whatever, there's bad people, and men run churches.
Right. I think, that's really important to say is like, when there's if somebody turns away from the church, okay, so let's say you are upset with something. You don't like how something's being run. Again, you can switch to a different church. But you don't want to give up on God.
No.
God isn't the reason. People are human. People make mistakes. People do things they shouldn't be doing. And we're going to react to it how we react to it.
Right. So when people are mad at God, I believe that it requires a more self-examination as to what the root of it is. For example, let's just say that this is like a crazy thing. I don't even know. I'm thinking of a crazy example. I must have pornography in my life. Okay. And the church won't.
Which, if anybody knows Simon, that's couldn't be farther from the truth. He's very anti-porn.
Well, okay. So person says they have to have that in their life, and they know that that's not what God would want, and they think, well, it's natural. I'm just a human being, and I need to, and they start justifying things. And then they start getting mad at God because it's just a no. It's a flat no. You shouldn't be involved in that kind of thing. And so then they just get angry. And that's maybe a bad example, but there's other examples. Like, let's just say...
Well, along that same line, there's many things of like people think the rules are too strict, and let's update the rules because, or, the way that we do things because we got to modernize things. And that's not how it works at the Catholic Church.
Yeah. And maybe a better example is... when somebody, like when a child is born with some kind of major deformation of some sort, with spina bifida or something that's why does God allow that? And if it's your child, you're going to be angry, and you're probably going to be angry at God. Like, God, how could you allow that? Why is life so hard? And why did my child get kidnapped? Or, all of these horrible things that happen in the world. And really the bottom line for the reason that all those things happen is not because of something that God did, but it's because of what humanity has done in the beginning. We made a choice to turn away from God. Mm-hmm. And this is the consequence, that we live in an imperfect world, and not only an imperfect world, but sometimes a really harsh world.
Right.
I mean, just read Genesis, and God explains what the world is going to be like now that we've made that decision.
Right. And also early on, before, like in the beginning, everything was perfect.
Right.
And then because of original sin, now it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. So we could be mad about that, but it is what it is. Mm. So we as humans, we can't change bad things happening.
Everything stems from original sin. The reason why things are really, really tough in this world.
Right.
Yeah, we fell. And we now are appointed to die. As before, we were appointed to live forever. Now we're not. Mm-hmm. Now we have to go through this. Now, thank God, God has made a plan of redemption, and now we can come back and live in a state of grace, like Adam and Eve did in the garden.
God did give us free will. We need to really know how to use that wisely. We are given choices. Some of the bad things that happen to us happen because of our free will, and we make bad choices. Mm. Other things that happen to us that are bad are from other people's bad choices. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then there's also things that happen in the world that we can't even fathom why they're happening, mm-hmm. but it doesn't mean that they're not for a higher purpose, a better purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some things that are just almost impossible to explain. Like, why would God allow a tsunami to wipe out a whole village? Why? Mm-hmm. That's hard to understand.
It is, but it doesn't mean that God is mad at us, that God is seeking evil for us. There are things like that happen because it's life and it's the world. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make us feel better. And it is like, it seems senseless. Mm. There's a lot of things. So I'm not of the school of thought of like, that I just have this attitude that, oh, well, everything's just as it's supposed to be, and we all have to just keep a good attitude about it. I'm certainly not saying that, but I realize that when bad things happen, and they're going to happen because of original sin, because God allows things to happen, it's the way of the world. Mm-hmm. How do we respond to it? What do we do with it? Like you were saying, like some things we have to go deep and say, okay, well, this happened because I made these bad choices. So now I have to suffer the consequences. Or somebody else made a bad choice and I'm the brunt of their bad choice. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things like that, a tsunami happens. Us being mad about it isn't going to change that it happened. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do with that? So I know, like I said in the beginning of this episode, I know after my accident, there was a lot of people. I was on a lot of prayer chains, and I know my mother-in-law at the time said a lot of people were asking if I was mad at God because, I was this young woman, I had these babies, I became paralyzed. What was my life going to look like? Was I mad at God? It's never, ever occurred to me to be mad at God or to blame God. Now, that's my story. I'm not saying everybody should have that feeling. If you are mad at God, tell God you're mad at him. He can take it. Mm-hmm. Tell him. Mm-hmm. Pray to him, yell at him, tell him, and then sit and listen and see what he has to tell you. See what he provides for you or what he shows you that he wants you to do to get through it, to get past it. So I know for my own self, when I've gone through traumatic things, and again, it's kind of odd because some of my traumatic things happened before I was Christian. Mm-hmm. And how did I handle those? Not very well, to be honest with you. Horrible. Mm-hmm. Handled them horribly. Mm-hmm. When I became Christian, I handled them in a different way. And now that I'm Catholic, I handle them in even a more different way. I've just been like learning and becoming more wise to how to handle traumatic situations as I'm becoming closer to the Lord and closer to my faith and seeking peace.
Right.
So I think when you go through these things, what I try to do is I try to say, okay, why is this happening? Not that I'll ever get an answer. Sometimes we're not supposed to get the answer. Sometimes we're supposed to just accept it, or we're supposed to try to work through it and pray about it and ask God for help and beg God for help and surrender to God, and that will help you get through. But other times it's like, okay, why did this happen? What can I learn from this? What could be the greater good that's going to come from this? And try to seek that out. If I just say, oh, this thing happened, now I'm going to be mad, I'm going to sit in a corner, in a ball, or I'm going to lash out at somebody and go after them and make their life miserable, an eye for an eye, that's not the way to handle this way of feeling or this anger. But I'm all for venting. I'm all for yelling it out, talking it out, going to confession, making an appointment with a priest or a deacon or somebody who you trust, or like you said, even going to therapy. It would be great if you can find a Catholic therapist. I've had both. I've had Catholic therapists and not. And, as long as you tell your non-Catholic therapist you're Catholic, that will help, I think, for them to know where you're coming from. But I think all those things, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to be frustrated. You have every right to not understand. But ultimately, what do you want from it? Do you want to just be angry and not find a solution? Do you want to be angry and live in that turmoil the rest of your life? Or do you want to try to work through it, find some forgiveness for people or yourself, try to ultimately find peace? Because to me, that's the best feeling ever, is to have some peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you say to find it, where? That's kind of what I think these people reaching out to you maybe want to know, like, how can I do this?
Well, that's why I'm saying, to me, it's starting with venting it out, whether that be to God, yelling at God. But then when somebody says they're mad at God, okay, do you want to stay mad at him? Do you want to live the rest of your life like this? Or are you asking me these things because you would like to work through it and find some peace? That's what I'm saying.
Right.
To me, there's two options. You either, like, I used to be a grudge holder. I used to have no interest in working things out with people and finding peace and calm and forgiveness. I had no interest in it. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm complete opposite. I've told you before, and maybe I've said this on the podcast, I have people who are mad at me, or in the past I've been mad at them. I've forgiven them. I don't have people now where if any person that I've had an altercation with in the past were to come to me, I would talk to them. I would want to work it out with them. I don't have anybody I can think of that if they actually did that I wouldn't work it out with them. Mm-hmm. But that's where I'm at. It doesn't mean that's where they are at.
Right.
So I think, to get to the point where you can say, I don't like what happened. I don't accept what happened necessarily. I'm not going to condone it. I don't like the sin, but I'm willing to talk to the sinner. I'm willing to talk to the person who hurt me, or I should do the same. If I've hurt someone, I'm going to go to talk to them and try to work it out. They might reject it.
Right.
But you have to, if you want, you have to take these steps. You can just sit and wallow in it if that's what you choose to do. You can say, I'm mad at God, I'm mad at this person, and that's how I want to be. Okay, then you're probably not going to be a very, happy person. You're not going to have any joy in your life, and you're going to be really struggling.
Yeah.
But I think if you can get some help, I think one of the things, I'm reading a book right now, which is really great, about the Eucharist. It's a beautiful book. I love it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they keep bringing up is when you're really struggling to, or not, whether you're struggling or not, to go sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament and just sit and listen to Jesus. And he's sitting there. He's there with you. And sometimes you can pour your heart out to him, and that's beautiful. But sometimes you can just go and just sit in the quiet, sit in the calm, and ask him to help you. Lord, I'm mad at you. What do I do with that?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need? What can you do? What can you? And most everybody that does that with the hope in their heart that they want to get better or feel better gets an answer. And also, one of the things I've been reading lately is everybody has their journey, and I don't know that I like that word all the time, but everybody has their path that God is doing with them. It's not about me telling them what to do, or you, or their priest, or anybody. God chooses when somebody's going to come back to the faith, or when somebody's going to forgive, or when there's going to be that moment. I've had that moment where all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be mad at my sister anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to harbor that anymore. You know what? I don't want to be mad at my 2 ex-husbands. I don't want to do that anymore. And it's brought me so much peace.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not been up to me. That's been up to God to work in my heart and soften my heart. So I think when people are mad at God, they need to take some steps on their own, but they also need to have that attitude of, I want to make this better.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you finally decided you wanted to come back, I don't think it was like overnight and you just went, oh my gosh, I'm back. What kind of, like, in your mind, what was like guiding you, or did you have an epiphany? Did you have an epiphany? Did you have an incident? Did you have something where you're like, you know what? I think I want to try going back.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, it was by chance. You're interested in going to RCIA, and I said that I would accompany you while you did that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think much of it. But as I started peeling back the layers of this faith that I had left many, many years ago, I now saw it with different eyes, and I saw the richness, and then I saw the need, and I saw what I was really missing out on, specifically the sacraments.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drew me back.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like, because when you first started going with me, like you said, I don't think it was something you were like excited about, like, oh my gosh, this is so great, you want to become Catholic and I'm going to go with you and I'm so excited for you. It wasn't like that. It was actually pretty...
I didn't really think I was going to get anything out of it. I actually asked you if you would go to another church with me, which is a non-denominational church, and you just said no.
Right.
And so, you know, I of course love God and wanted to go to church, and I just thought, okay, it's been 25 years. Let me just give it a try and see if anything's changed.
Right. But what I was going to say is, so you came back with me, but it wasn't like all of a sudden that you were excited to go back. You came, I would say kind of begrudgingly, but you did it anyway. And then again, I feel like God picked that moment to have you come back. And if you hadn't, like, this is the way that I'm talking about, like looking at why something happens and the positive spin on it. So if you wouldn't have left the Catholic Church and gone over to a non-denominational church,
Mm-hmm.
and like gotten that experience,
Right.
when you came back with me, because you weren't coming back to the Catholic Church to go to the Catholic Church.
No.
If you wouldn't have done all that, now when you came back with, and you were like experiencing this with me and going to RCIA with me and hearing what they had to say, you could compare it.
Right.
And so you wouldn't have been able to do that. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people that are cradle Catholics. They drift off because they don't know what they're doing, why they're doing it. They get bored with it. They don't think it's, they're going through the motions, but they're not really engaged in it. They come at Easter and Christmas. They're not engaged in it. They come on the holy days. They're not engaged in everything. They're just there checking a box.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to think if people are going to turn away, because it seems like they do at a certain time, and I have a theory about that, why they turn away at a certain period in their teenage years and young adult years. When God wants them to come back and they come back, I think that's why it's a more rich experience, because then they've been out in the world.
Right.
It didn't necessarily work how they thought it was going to.
Right.
It's not a very safe world out there.
Right.
But when you have the arms of Christ around you, the Jesus swaddle, as I call it, then you feel like, oh, I can handle anything because I have him with me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the people that turn away, if they don't have that feeling from the Lord to come back, or even an invitation. You and I have a friend who he's more like an acquaintance. And one day, I'm always talking about Fresh Catholic, and I was so excited. And he said, this quote of, "I used to be Catholic." I said, "Oh, really? What happened?" "Oh, I don't go to Mass anymore." "Why?" I don't like it." I said, "Oh gosh, that's horrible." He had a bad experience, nothing really major, but it was a bad experience. And I said, "Well, I'm going to invite you personally to come to our church and give it another try since you've been away for so long." "Oh, I don't want to do that." I said, "Well, standing invitation. I'm there every Sunday at 11 o'clock. Well, I'm there every day at 8 o'clock. If you really want to come early, you can come then. But 11 o'clock on Sunday, a personal invitation." And sure enough, he not only showed up one Sunday, but then he showed up on another Sunday with his mother. And I thought maybe that's all it took was an invitation. Maybe that's all it took was for him to come back and see that it was different than when he was there 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Again, I know people have been hurt, but maybe give it another chance. Don't blame the entire church or God for something a human has done to you.
Right, for sure.
And, all I guess I'm saying is I'm really acknowledging people's hurts, and I'm really acknowledging people's traumas, because I've certainly had a lot of that in my life. You've had a lot of that in your life, and I love you. You and I are one flesh, and so when you hurt, I hurt, whether it's past or present hurt. And I'm not discounting that for anybody, but I'm just saying from my own personal opinion, when I've been sad or upset or hurt or harmed by other people, I've had to work through it, and now I have the Lord to help me. I didn't have that beauty and that grace before. Now I do. And I can tell you what, it feels so much better to be at peace than to be in turmoil.
Right. No, and I think that's super important that people have that experience. And I think it's important that the church, the body of the church, also acknowledge those people who have been hurt. Like our church, they have a healing mass. And they acknowledge people who have been abused by clergy, have had other issues within the church, to come to a healing mass and to receive healing and go to confession and just kind of let it all out. It's an open invitation, and I think that's so important that they do in our parish, and I'm sure they do it in other parishes. And I would just encourage other churches to have more of that.
Right. And also, it's not just for people who've been hurt by the church. It's for anybody who needs healing from any abuse or anything. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to go to. And we have ours once a month. I think it gives people a lot of peace. And I know a lot of people count on that mass.
Right.
It's really important. Anytime they also have the healing masses or with the oils, I always go up for that because, I just have so many hurts and I need healing.
Right.
So I think, I hope this episode has been helpful to people to want to work through these things, whether it's at the church, whether it's mad at God or mad at other people. We're not in control of a lot of things in our lives, but we can control if we want to work through things and if we want to have peace and forgiveness and healing. Those we can do. And it makes it even better when you have the Lord doing it with you and in you and next to you and holding your hand. And maybe if you heal, it helps heal others as well.
I think so.
Yeah. So, there's nothing better than when you can tell somebody you forgive them, you can see the weight lift off of them.
Yeah. And I think also, when you see somebody who's so hurt they're angry or just plain angry, and imagine if there's an angry guy and has a little kid that's always looking up to them, for that little child to see that parent healed and that anger gone away, you're going to change not only that father's life, but that little kid's life.
Right. And, just having that anger, holding up inside of you, it's just, it really hurts a lot of people around you. And some people don't want to get through it. Some people don't want peace, and some people don't want to forgive or be forgiving.
Yeah. Well, what I learned in therapy is, we all have these masks, and some people have a lot of masks and really thick ones. And, we develop these ways of protecting ourselves when inside, God just wants just to, have a relationship with that soul of yours.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you have people you've hurt, try to make amends with them, try to ask for their forgiveness. And then if they don't want to forgive you, or they don't want to work through this with you, or even just say, let's squash this and move on with our lives. If they don't want to do that, pray. I know I have a lot of people that aren't forgiving me, and I just pray for them every single day. I pray for their softened hearts. I pray that we can work it out. I pray for forgiveness and healing. So, never give up. God creates miracles. God does soften people's hearts, but try to be open to it. And I pray for all my listeners for peace in their hearts and to find that. So thank you, Simon, for opening up today.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded in Ventura, California.